this was the last version of us, the one without urgency. We moved like nothing was ending, like tomorrow would quietly fix what today didn't say. You left the way you always did. I answered the same old way. We kept the rhythm familiar, not realizing this was a tape we wouldn't replay. I thought endings came with warnings, with a feeling you could name, but sometimes the last version looks ordinary and stays. I didn't know this was the last version of us, and that's what hurts the most. Not the leaving, not the loss, but how gently it slipped past my notice. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no final scene to discuss. I didn't know this was the last version of us, and my heart learned some endings don't even know who they are. We talked about small future plans, nothing too far ahead. I thought that meant we were steady, not realizing we were just avoiding everything left unsaid. You said you felt a little tired, I said I understood. We named exhaustion instead of distance, and called that being good. I confused calm with continuity. Silence was staying close, but love can fade between sentences when no one asks what's missing the most. I didn't know this was the last version of us. I felt it later on in the way memory rearranged itself after you were already gone. You said maybe things just changed and nothing really broke. I didn't know this was the last version of us, and that's not me. This was still let go. Maybe if I had known, I would have held your hand longer. Maybe I would have asked the questions that felt too heavy at the time. But love doesn't always warn you before it shifts its shape. Sometimes it lets you live inside it until it's already too late. Now I look back at ordinary moments with gentler eyes. I see how we were slowly changing without ever saying goodbye. I'm learning not every ending is loud, not every loss feels sharp. Some goodbyes happen quietly while you're still standing in the same room, believing you're safe. I didn't know this was the last version of us, and I stayed like it wasn't. Not because I didn't feel the shift, but because I believe we had more time. I remember us without bitterness, without rewriting what we were. I didn't know this was the last version of us, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love doesn't always end with clarity. Sometimes it ends with familiarity, not something you prepare for emotionally, just something you realize after. Some endings don't close the door, they fade the lights. When you realize that was the last version of us, you learn to be gentle with the present, to speak when something matters, and to love without assuming there will always be another version waiting. before you did. Before the words could land, I heard it in the waiting, in the way. Time stretched between my question and your hands. You looked like you were listening, but something had already left. Your quiet filled the whole room with answers you never said out loud, but somehow I felt. I thought silence meant thinking that truth was on its way, but silence can arrive fully formed when the heart has already stepped away. Your silence spoke before you did, and it told me everything. Not rejection, not goodbye, just distance. Learning how to sing, we didn't fight, we didn't break. No moment to explain. Your silence spoke before you did, and my heart learned some truths don't need words to stay. I replayed your pauses carefully, retone instead of sound. I learned how to read absence in the way your presence was technically still around. You answered when you had to, but never where it mattered most. I felt connection thin and like warmth that leaves a room without a sound. I confused quiet with kindness, space with being fair, but love shouldn't feel like decoding what someone won't share. Your silence spoke before you did. I felt it in my chest, in the way my hope lowered its voice and tried not to ask for more. You said you needed time to think, the words would come eventually. Your silence spoke before you did, and intuition finally believed what it already knew. Maybe silence felt safer than naming what had changed, because once you speak the truth, you can't return to the version of us that stayed unnamed. I didn't need perfect honesty or answers shaped like blame. I just needed to know if your quiet was a pause or a decision already made. Now I listen beyond language, beyond promises or tone. I trust what isn't reaching back, even when someone's physically at home. I'm learning silence is communication, not neutral, not unclear. And when silence speaks before words, your heart already knows what it's hearing. Your silence spoke before you did, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't hear the message, but because I remembered the good. I remember us without bitterness, without asking silence to change. Your silence spoke before you did, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel responsive and alive, like words that arrive when they matter, not something you interpret quietly while your heart waits to be met halfway. Some answers don't come from words, they come from absence. And when silence speaks before someone does, you're allowed to listen, to choose clarity over guessing, to one love that meets you in sound and presence, and to wait for a heart that doesn't make you translate quiet into meaning, that speaks honestly and then never leaves you wondering if silence already said goodbye. because my heart grew less, but because loving fully started costing me pieces I couldn't keep replacing in my chest. I stopped reaching with urgency, stopped asking to be seen. I learned how to love you gently from a distance that kept the rest of me intact. I thought love shrinking meant it was dying, that less meant something was wrong. But sometimes love gets quieter when it's learning how to survive too long. I loved you in smaller ways at the end, and it hurt in a softer tone. Not loud, not dramatic, just careful about what I still gave away. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no moment to defend. I loved you in smaller ways at the end, and my heart learned sometimes love changes shape before it learns how to leave. I showed up with measured affection, saved words I used to spill. I loved you through habits and kindness, not through hope that things would suddenly feel different or real. You said I seemed less intense lately, that something in me had changed. But intensity was never the problem, it was loving loudly in a place that couldn't hear me the same. Confused effort with erosion, giving with being whole, but loving in smaller ways was the only way I knew how to not lose myself completely. I loved you in smaller ways at the end. I felt it in my breath, in the way my yes arrived slower and my no finally learned to rest. You said maybe we were growing up, that this was what love became. I loved you in smaller ways at the end, and instinct finally admitted something deeper was already gone. Maybe smaller love was self-protection, not absence, not regret. Because loving fully without being met teaches your heart how to quietly step back. I didn't stop caring about you or wishing we could align. I just stopped giving love in ways that asked me to disappear every time. Now I notice when love reduces itself, when care becomes precise. I trust the moment affection starts negotiating with survival instead of joy. I'm learning love isn't meant to shrink, it's meant to expand or end. And when you love someone in smaller ways, your heart already knows you're near. I loved you in smaller ways at the end, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remember the good. I'll remember us without bitterness, without blaming how we changed. I loved you in smaller ways at the end, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel safe enough to give fully, not something you ration to survive, not something you quietly reduce while your heart learns how to say goodbye without saying a word. Some love doesn't end suddenly, it softens first. And when 'cause you love someone in smaller ways at the end. You understand you weren't heartless, you were protecting what was left of you. Because the truest love doesn't ask you to become smaller to stay. And the bravest ending is the one where you stop shrinking and let yourself be whole again. Love didn't feel like home anymore. Not unsafe, just unfamiliar. I still knew the layout of your voice, but something in it stopped inviting me to stay longer. I used to rest inside your presence, like my body finally knew the way. Then one day I noticed I was standing instead of sitting, ready to leave before you asked me to stay. I thought home was permanent, that love meant you could exhale. But home doesn't make you brace your chest or rehearse so much of yourself you're allowed to reveal. Love didn't feel like home anymore, and that truth arrived quietly. Not sudden, not cruel, just missing what used to hold me. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no door slammed shut. Love didn't feel like home anymore, and my heart learned you can outgrow places that once let you rest. I noticed how my laughter softened, how I kept my shoes on indoors. I stopped leaving parts of myself out just in case they made the room feel too full. You said things felt normal to you, that love doesn't always feel warm, but love shouldn't feel like visiting, like you're careful not to disturb what isn't really yours anymore. I confuse familiarity with belonging, routine with being held, but home isn't where you're tolerated, it's where your heart is welcome as it is. Love didn't feel like home anymore. I felt it in my breath and the way my shoulders never fully learned to rest. You said maybe I was changing, that comfort always fades. Love didn't feel like home anymore, and instinct finally you admitted I was staying out of memory, not safety. Out of memory, not safety. Maybe love stopped being home when I stopped being myself, when I learned how to shrink gently so nothing would spill or ask for help. I didn't need perfection or certainty or passion burning bright. I just needed love that felt like taking off my coat, not keeping it on in case I needed to leave. Now I listen for warmth and silence, for ease I don't have to earn. I trust the spaces where my nervous system finally learns how to soften. I'm learning home isn't a person, it's a feeling that stays. And when love doesn't feel like home anymore, your heart already knows it's time to find your way. but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without forcing what we were. Love didn't feel like home anymore, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel safe and familiar, like a place your heart can settle, not something you survive politely while quietly searching for the exit. Some homes don't collapse, they stop holding you. And when love doesn't feel like home anymore, you're allowed to leave gently, to trust the part of you that longs for warmth, to choose spaces that let you exhale, and to wait for a love that feels like coming in from the cold, like being known without effort, and like a place your heart doesn't have to ask permission to belong. We forgot to check on each other, not all at once, not by choice. It happened in ordinary moments, in tired replies, and softened voices that didn't ask for more. We shared up days, not feelings, traded facts instead of care. I told you what my days look like, but never stopped to ask if you were really okay. I thought love stayed alert on its own, that closeness didn't need reminders, but connection fades quietly when concern stops being intentional. We forgot to check on each other and called it being busy, not distant, not unkind, just present in a way that missed something essential. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no moment to uncover. We forgot to check on each other, and my heart learned neglect doesn't always look like leaving. Sometimes it looks like staying without noticing. I noticed your smiles, or I've practiced. Mine learned to do the same. We asked, how was your day? Like a habit, not a doorway to what we couldn't name. I waited for you to look closer, you waited for me too. And somewhere between politeness, we stopped being curious about the truth. I confused comfort with care, routine with being seen. But love shouldn't feel like autopilot, running gently on what it used to mean something. We forgot to check on each other. I felt it in my chest, in the way my honesty lowered its voice and tried not to ask for rest. You said everything seemed fine lately, then nothing felt off to you. We forgot to check on each other, and intimacy slowly forgot what it was supposed to do. Maybe checking in felt risky, like it might open something heavy, because once you ask how someone really is, you have to decide if you're willing to stay present with the answer. I didn't need fixing or solutions, or love shaped like advice. I just needed to know. You noticed when my silence lasted longer than usual. Now does when things feel quiet. When care feels assumed, I trust the urge to ask real questions. Before distance learns how to bloom, I'm learning love doesn't survive on memory or on history alone. It survives when you keep checking in, even when nothing seems obviously wrong. Because I remember the good, I remember us without bitterness, without blaming what we were. We forgot to check on each other, and choosing myself is how I live. Love should feel attentive and alive, like someone who notices you're quiet, not something slowly drift through together, while your hearts wait to be asked about. Some love doesn't end in anger, it fades in inattention. And when you forget to check on each other, you're allowed to notice the one love that stays curious, to choose connection that keeps asking, and to wait for a heart that checks. And even on ordinary days, that asks how you are and actually listens, and that never lets care become something you assume, instead of something you show. You were already half gone before I learned how to name it. I felt it in the way you listened, like your body stayed, but your attention had other places to be. You smiled when I spoke, answered when it mattered least, but something behind your eyes was already packing up quietly. I thought distance needed space, that leaving looked obvious, but some people go halfway and let you do the rest of the missing. You were already half gone, and I kept loving whole, not desperate, not blind, just hopeful in a way that slowly took its toll. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no moment to respond. You were already half gone, and my heart learned you can't hold someone who's already letting go. You were already half gone, I felt it in my chest, and the way my honesty learned when to rest. You said I was imagining things, that closeness comes and goes. You were already half gone, and instinct finally knew what my heart didn't want to know. Maybe leaving halfway felt safer than saying you were done, because endings ask I trust the moments where love doesn't hesitate to fully exist. I'm learning half love feels heavier than none at all, because you keep reaching for someone who's already turning their back down the hall. You were already half gone and I stayed longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the absence, but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without chasing what withdrew. You were already half gone, and choosing myself is holding down. Some people don't leave suddenly, they fade in stages. And when someone is already half gone, you're allowed to stop trying to make them stay. I choose love that arrives fully, that keeps its attention with you, and that never asks you to compete with distance for a place in someone's heart. I stayed quiet so we wouldn't break, like silence could hold us together. I swallowed the sharp edges of truth, smoothed my words until they fit the version of love you preferred. I noticed when my honesty danced the room, how your breath changed shape. So I learned which thoughts to keep inside. Believing restraint was how love stayed safe. I thought quiet was protection, that peace meant holding back, but silence can become the fault line where everything you don't say starts to crack. I stayed quiet so we wouldn't break, and it worked for a while. Not healed, not whole, just holding a fragile smile. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no moment to accuse. I stayed quiet so we wouldn't break, and my heart learned sometimes what breaks you is what you refuse to use your voice for. I measure my feelings carefully, deliver them half size. I chose a tone that wouldn't shake you, even when my chest was asking to be honest. You said things felt calmer lately, that nothing felt wrong but calm, built on unspoken truth. Is just tension, learning how to stay quiet for too long. I confuse peace with absence of conflict, stillness with being kind, but love that survives on silence is love that's already asking you to disappear. Then I stayed quiet so we wouldn't break. I felt it in my breath, in the way my knees learn when not to exist. You said I seemed easier lately, that things finally felt okay. I stayed quiet could survive me showing up as I am. Now I listen when silence feels heavy, when quiet costs too much. I trust the urge to speak gently before my voice learns how to disappear again. I'm learning love isn't glass, it doesn't shatter from care. And if truth breaks it completely, it was never meant to hold you there. By shrinking yourself while your heart waits to be heard. Some silence isn't maturity, it's fear wearing calm. And when you stay quiet so love won't break, you're allowed to stop to choose connection that can hold true to one love that listens without retreating, and to trust that the right love doesn't require you to disappear quietly, just to stay intact. Without calling your name, I kept your memory folded in the pauses between my days. I still pass places we once stayed, still hear you when it rains, but I don't reach for my phone anymore. I let longing sit without complaining. I thought missing meant weakness, something I had to outrun. But some love doesn't leave loudly, it just stays after it's done. I learned to miss you quietly, without needing you to know. Not because it doesn't hurt anymore, but because I learned to let it go slow. We didn't end with broken words, no fight to recollect. I learned to miss you quietly, and love became something I carried with respect. I smile when people ask about shit, say we just grew apart. I don't explain the small details of how you still live in parts of my heart. instead of asking if they're real. I trust the kind of love that stays, it doesn't fade with fear. And I thank you for the way you taught me what I need and what I can't keep near. I learned to miss you quietly, and it doesn't mean I lost, it means I love without conditions, even when the ending had a cost. I remember us with tenderness, not as something I neglect. I learned to miss you quietly, and that's how I learned some love is gentle and true, even when it doesn't remain, even when it leaves only a memory and soft sad songs that play in the rain. Some love doesn't need to return to be real, and if you're missing someone quietly, it doesn't mean you're weak, it means you love deeply enough to let go without breaking yourself, and to carry the memory with grace instead of grief. Your love came with expiration dates, I just didn't read the sign. I trusted every promise like it wasn't borrowed time. You loved me in clear conditions, on days I didn't fall apart. I learned how to stay convenient so I wouldn't outgrow your heart. I thought love just needed patience, needed faith to stay alive, but love shouldn't feel like waiting for the moment it decides to expire. Your love came with expiration days, I felt it before it showed, in the way your touch grew careful, like it didn't want to hold too close. We didn't break in anger or fire, no words to overstate. Your love came with expiration days, and I stayed past the time it couldn't authenticate. You said this is just a phase, when I needed you to stay. You loved me best when I was easy, not when I needed more than okay. I became good at self-editing, at keeping my tears on hold. I learned love doesn't always leave, sometimes it simply grows cold. I confuse restraint with maturity, silence with being kind, but love shouldn't feel like shrinking just to stay within its time. Your love came with expiration days, I saw it in your eyes, in the way you looked past me like you'd already said goodbye. Inside you called it time and called it life, said nothing's meant to stay. Your love came with expiration dates, and I paid for loving you that way. Maybe you never meant to hurt me, you just loved in limited supply. Some hearts give affection carefully, with an end already in mind. I don't blame you for not staying, or myself for trying too long, but love shouldn't feel like a countdown where you're bracing for what's gone. Now I worry between the kindness, between maybe and we'll see. Some love isn't cruel, it's just temporary. And if you're grieving a love that expired, you're not foolish for believing you just loved honestly. In a world where some hearts offer affection with limits they never say out loud. I missed you while you were next to me, while your hand was holding mine. Your eyes were looking through me like your heart was already somewhere else in time. We talked about the little things, avoided what felt too real. I learned how absence can exist in the same room where love used to feel. I thought closeness meant safety, thought presence meant we were okay. But you can sit inches from someone and still feel a world away. I missed you while you were next to me, and that hurt more than goodbye, because I could feel you slipping without ever knowing why. We didn't fight, we didn't scream, nothing shattered or fell free. I missed you while you were next to me, and loneliness learned how to breathe beside me. You smiled when I spoke your name, but it didn't reach your eyes. I noticed how your laughter started sounding like a line you memorized. I stopped asking if you were okay, stopped leaning in too close. It felt like loving you carefully was the only way to keep your ghost. I confused quiet with comfort, stillness with staying strong. But love shouldn't feel like waiting for someone who's already gone. I missed you while you were next to me, felt it settle in my chest. In the silence after I love you, where your voice didn't quite rest. You said nothing was really wrong, said I was feeling too deep. I missed you while you were next to me, and learned how love can fall asleep. Maybe you didn't mean to fade away, maybe life just pulled you thin. But love shouldn't feel like reaching out and never knowing if you're held back or just holding air again. I didn't need perfection or forever, or promises carved in stone. I just needed you to be present, not physically here, but emotionally home. Now I listen to my instincts, to the ache I used to deny. I trust a love that shows up fully, that doesn't leave its heart behind. I want connection that leans in, that stays when things get heavy to see. I don't wanna miss someone again while they're sitting right next to me. I missed you while you were next to me, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel alone, but because I remember the good. I'll carry us without anger, without blaming how it had to be. I missed you while you were next to me, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel awake and warm, not distant, numb or half asleep. Not something you grieve while it's still alive and sitting beside you quietly. Some goodbyes don't happen when someone least mostly happen when you're still together, but no longer connected. And if you ever miss someone while they were right there, you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for real love. We didn't know how to talk about this, so we talked around it instead. We laughed at things that didn't matter, ignored what was growing unsaid. I felt it every time you paused before answering my name, like you were choosing safer words to keep us looking the same. I thought silence meant respect, that love knew when to wait, but silence can also be fear of saying something you can't translate. We didn't know how to talk about it, so we called it being tired. Not broken, not falling apart, just distant and uninspired. We didn't fight, we didn't cry, nothing visibly amiss. We didn't know how to talk about this, and slowly we became what we missed. You asked me how my day had been. I said fine, like a reflex reply. I learned how to edit my feelings so nothing would ask you why. I could feel the room between us, even when we shared the same bed. It's strange how closeness can disappear without anyone actually leaving yet. I confuse calm with connection, stillness with being okay. But love shouldn't feel like tiptoeing around something that's begging to be named. We didn't know how to talk about this. I felt it tight in my chest, in the way my honesty hesitated, waiting to be welcomed in, I guess. You said maybe it was nothing, just stress, just time, just life. We didn't know how to talk about this, and love learned how to survive. Half alive, and maybe we were both afraid of what honesty would undo. Because once you say the truth out loud, you have to decide what to do. I didn't need blame or explanations, or a reason to be right. I just needed a place where my feelings could exist, without needing to be polite. Now I notice when conversations stay shallow, when silence feels too loud. I trust the people who lean into discomfort, who don't leave love unspoken just to keep peace around. I'm learning that naming the ache is kinder than letting it stay, because unspoken pain doesn't disappear, it just finds quieter ways to decay. We didn't know how to talk about this, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remember the good. I'll carry us without bitterness, without wishing we were different then. We didn't know how to talk about this, and choosing myself is how I learned love should invite honesty in, not punish you for trying to connect. Not something you lose slowly because you were afraid to speak what you felt. Some endings don't come from cruelty, they come from avoidance. And if you didn't know how to talk about it, you weren't weak, you were human, learning too late that real love makes room for difficult words and doesn't disappear when the truth finally speaks. Slowly packed its things, not all at once, not loud. It folded up our habits and left them on the couch. It took the way you said my name, the warmth before the night, left behind the echoes of us trying to feel right. I thought love would leave dramatically with tears or slammed doors, but sometimes it just grows quieter than it was before. Love slowly packed its things, and I pretended not to see. Not broken, not in pieces, just lighter without me. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no reason to explain. Love slowly packed its things and left me standing in the space where it once stayed. It took our future conversations that someday we'd repeat, left behind unfinished sentences still hanging in the sheets. You said nothing's really wrong, I nodded, played along, but love was already learning how to leave without being gone. I confused quiet with comfort, stillness with being okay, but love shouldn't feel like watching something precious fade away. Love slowly packed its things. tired. Some hearts don't break loudly, they fade from being requited. I didn't need a feeling or blame or reasons to hold tight. I just needed love to stay present, not quietly say goodbye mid-sentence in the night. Now I notice early departures, the subtle ways love bends. I trust the ones who stay curious, who don't let silence speak for them. I want a love that unpacks slowly, that settles in our leaves. Not one that disappears politely while calling it peace. Love slowly packed its things, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the loss, but because I remembered the good. I'll carry us without resentment, without blaming how we tried. Love slowly packed its things, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel rooted and alive. Not something you watch retreat, not something that leaves quietly while you're still hoping it will speak. Some endings don't announce themselves, they whisper. And if love packed its things without warning, you're not foolish for staying confused. You just believed in something real, and that belief deserved honesty, not a goodbye. Were never used words. I try not to need too much, kept my own small and neat. I learned how to fold my feelings so they wouldn't take up your space in the sea. I smiled when you needed distance, said it's okay, I'm fine. I practiced being easy to love, even when it cost what was mine. I thought love meant self-control, knowing when not to ask. But love shouldn't feel like shrinking just to fit someone else's mask. I tried not to need too much, and I called that being strong. Not broken, not demanding, just quiet for two. We didn't fight, I didn't cry, no reason to react. I tried not to need too much, and slowly I forgot I was allowed to ask. You loved me best when I was light, when I didn't lean too near. I learned how to hold my breath so my heart wouldn't sound so clear. I stopped sharing half my thoughts, stopped reaching when I should. It felt like loving you carefully was the only way to stay in your book. I confused patience with silence, peace with letting go. But love shouldn't feel like surviving on the minimum. It chose to show. I tried not to need too much, felt it tight in my chest. In the pause after I miss you, when my words waited to be guessed. You said maybe I was sensitive, and love shouldn't feel so tight. I tried not to need too much and dim myself to keep you I chose it out of fear, because asking for more felt risky, like love might disappear. I didn't need excess or perfection, or constant proof you'd stay. I just needed space to be human, to need without being pushed away. Now I listen when my body aches, when something feels off inside. I trust the love that doesn't flinch when my needs arrive. I want arms that don't loosen when I ask to be held. I don't want to apologize anymore for being myself. I tried not to need too much, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel empty, but because I remembered the good. I'll carry us without bitterness, without blaming how I coped. I tried not to need too much, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel generous and safe, not ration, not something you earn, not something that asks you to disappear quietly, just to keep it from burning. Some needs aren't weaknesses, they're honesty. And if you ever tried not to need too much, you weren't asking for too much love. You were asking for the right kind, one that doesn't make you smaller, one that stays when you reach out with open hands. We let comfort replace care, mistook routine for being close. We memorized each other's schedules, but stopped asking how the other really felt the most. Your voice stayed calm and familiar, mine learned not to shake. We shared the same quiet evenings, but something inside was learning to ache. I thought stability meant safety, the calm meant we were fine, but comfort can slowly numb a love when no one's checking what's been left behind. We let comfort replace care, and call that growing strong, not broken, not dramatic, just steady for too long. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no reason to despair. We let comfort replace care, and forgot that love needs intention there. We knew each other's favorite shows, but not the fears we never brought. You'd ask me how my day had been, I'd say it's all okay. I learned how to answer lightly, so nothing would ask you to stay. I confused ease with connection, peace with something real, but love shouldn't feel like home. let comfort replace care. I felt it settle in my chest, and the way my honesty hesitated, unsure if it would be welcomed or just addressed. You said this is normal, this is fine, like care was optional there. We let comfort replace care, and closeness quietly disappeared. Maybe we were just tired or afraid to make things shake, because care requires effort and comfort asks you to stay the same. I didn't need intensity or chaos or love that burned too bright. I just needed to feel chosen again, not assumed every night. Now I notice when love goes quiet, when presence feels too thin. I trust the people who lean in closer when something feels uncertain within. I won't care that checks in softly, that doesn't stop once it's secure. I don't want love that settles in comfort and forgets what care is for. We let comfort replace care, and I stayed longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remembered the good. I'll carry us without bitterness, without blaming how we tried. We let comfort replace care, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel attentive and alive, not something you maintain on rest, not something you lose slowly because you stop looking at it with care. Some love doesn't end in anger, it fades in comfort. And if you stayed where care was replaced by ease, you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for presence, for effort, for love that keeps choosing you, even after it feels safe. You stopped holding me with intention. Your arms were there but not your heart. Like touch became a habit instead of a place we were at, together at the start. I felt it in the way you reached, now pulling me in close, like you were touching out a memory, not because you still chose. I thought love just changes shape, learns quieter ways to stay. But there's a difference between comfort and slowly pulling away. You stopped holding me with intention, and I felt it in my chest. In the seconds before your arms relaxed, like you weren't fully present. We didn't argue, didn't speak, nothing harsh or mentioned. You stopped holding me with intention, and my body noticed before my heart accepted. You held me like it was routine, like something checked off late. I learned how absence can exist even when we share the same space. I stayed still so you wouldn't notice how much I leaned stopped holding me with intention. I felt it every night in the way your arms loosened first, already preparing to let go. Inside you said nothing was really wrong, that I was reading tension. You stopped holding me with intention, and affection turned into a gentle omission. Maybe you didn't mean to stop, maybe life just made you tired. But love shouldn't feel like contact without desire. I didn't need perfection or passion on fire, or grand displays of proof. I just needed to feel wanted in the quiet moments too. Now I notice how my body reacts when touch feels disconnected. I trust the love that reaches for me like it knows exactly why it's connected. I want arms that say I'm here, not just physically present. I don't wanna be held out of habit. I wanna be held with intention. You stopped holding me with intention, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without hating what we were missing. You stopped holding me with intention, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love should feel deliberate and warm, not something you do on reflex, not something that fades quietly while you're still standing right next to it. Some goodbyes don't come with words, they come through touch. And when someone stops holding you with intention, your body knows before your heart admits it. You're allowed to want arms that mean it. I felt the ending in ordinary moments, not in tears or last goodbyes. In the way you said good morning without really looking in my eyes. It showed up in simple evenings, dishes drying side by side. Your silence wasn't angry, just distant, in a way you didn't try to hide. I thought endings came with warnings, with signs you couldn't miss. But sometimes love slips quietly through the cracks of what still looks like this. I felt the ending in ordinary moments, and I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I was scared of making it real. If it was hurt, we didn't break, we didn't fall, nothing loudly went wrong. I felt the ending in ordinary moments and held on while love was already moving on. It was there when you forgot to ask if I made it home okay. In the way my stories ended before you fully stayed. Failures come with safety, stillness with something strong. But love shouldn't feel like surviving a quiet sense that something's gone. I felt the ending in ordinary moments, felt it settle in my chest. In the pause of after I love you, when your voice didn't rest, you said nothing was really wrong, that I was just sensitive. I felt the ending in moments and realized love can live before it actually kills. Maybe neither of us meant to fade. Maybe life just pulled us in. But love shouldn't feel like waiting for someone who's already halfway out from within. I didn't need a dramatic ending or proof that I was right. I just needed presence in the small things, not distance disguised as a quiet life. Now I listen closer to the details, to what love does when it's real. I trust the people who show up in the moments they don't have to, but still do. I want a love that stays awake, that doesn't drift when days repeat. No one that ends unnoticed in ordinary moments at my feet. I felt the ending in ordinary moments, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel alone, but because I remember the good. I remember us without anger, without wishing we'd known sooner. Then I felt the ending in moments, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel present and alive, not something you slowly outgrow, not something that disappears between shared routines and quiet hellos. Some endings don't arrive loudly, they arrive gently. And if you felt the goodbye before it was spoken, you weren't imagining it, you were listening to your heart, noticing what love could no longer say out loud. Love didn't argue for us, didn't raise its voice. It stayed quiet in the corner while we kept calling silence a choice. I waited for you to fight for us, to say let's not let this go. But love just watched us drift apart, like it already knew what we wouldn't say out loud or show. I thought love would insist, would push us back in line. But love can also grow tired when it's always the one trying. Love didn't argue for us, didn't beg or defend. Not because it wasn't real, but because we stopped meeting it halfway in the end. We didn't shout, we didn't blend, nothing loud or unjust. Love didn't argue for us, and distance quietly did the rest. You said maybe this is normal, like drifting was a phase. I nodded, kept my questions small, didn't wanna sound afraid. I felt the effort leave the room, felt hope start losing weight. Love was still there between us, but no one asked it to stay. I confused calm with maturity, letting go with being kind. But love shouldn't feel like watching something precious fade in real time. Love didn't argue for us. I felt it in my chest, in the way my honesty hesitated, unsure if it was welcome or just exist. You said, why make it harder? Like caring was a test. Love didn't argue for us, and effort slowly learned to rest. Maybe love trusted us too much, thought we'd step in and speak. But love can't survive on hope alone when no one's willing to be brave and reach. I didn't need winning or being right, or tears to prove we tried. I just needed to know we were both willing to stand on the same side. Now I notice when love leans away, when effort feels one-sided. I trust the people who speak up early, who don't let silence decide it. I want a love that advocates, that doesn't go quiet when it's hard. Not one that waits to be saved while slowly falling apart. Love didn't argue for us, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the ending, but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without blaming how we felt. Love didn't argue for us, and choosing myself is how I learned love should speak up and stay present. Now watch yourself fade in silence, not something you lose slowly, because no one was willing to stand up and save us. Some love doesn't end in conflict, it ends in quiet agreement. And if love didn't argue for you, it doesn't mean it wasn't real. It means love needed voices, effort and courage, and it can't survive where no one is willing to speak or it. Walked away without closing doors, didn't slam them, didn't shout. I left things where they were standing, let silence figure it out. I packed my voice in careful boxes, left the light on in the hall. I didn't want to make it final, just wanted room to feel it all. I thought endings needed certainty, clear lines, a last goodbye. But sometimes leaving is just listening to what your heart has already tried. I walked away without closing doors, and that was harder than it seemed. just tired of holding unspoken dreams. We didn't fight, we didn't fall. No blame to rearrange. I walked away without closing doors and learned not all exits need to feel like change. I still remember how you breathe, the quiet before you sleep. I didn't leave because I stopped loving. I left because love started costing more than I could keep. I stayed gentle in my leaving, didn't take the photos down. I wanted us to stay human, not turn into something we drown. I confused hope with holding on, patience with staying still. But love shouldn't feel like standing in a doorway, afraid to feel. I walked away without closing doors, felt it tight in my chest, and the way my honesty paused, unsure if leaving softly was best. You asked if this was permanent, I said I don't know yet. I walked away without closing doors and chose myself without burning what we had in regret. Maybe I left space on purpose in case growth came back around. But love shouldn't ask you to disappear just to keep possibility sound. I didn't need certainty or closure or reasons carved in stone. I just needed to stop waiting in a place that never felt like home. Now I understand gentle endings, how kindness can still mean enough. I trust the strength it takes to leave without turning love into something rough. I want a love that meets me fully, that doesn't live half open, unsure. I don't want to stand in doorways anymore, waiting for something that never arrives for sure. I walked away without closing doors, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the loss, but because I remember the good. I'll carry us without resentment, without rewriting what we were. I walked away without closing doors, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel clear and alive, not something you hover inside, not something you keep waiting on, while your heart stands quietly outside. Some departures don't need final words, they need honesty. And if you walked away without closing doors, you weren't indecisive, you were leaving with care, with respect, with the hope that love, whether it returns or not, doesn't have to be destroyed to be released. I walked away without closing doors, didn't slam them, didn't shout. I left things where they were standing, let silence figure it out. I packed my voice in careful boxes, Left the light on in the hall. I didn't want to make it final, just wanted room to feel it all. I thought endings needed certainty, clear lines, a last goodbye. But sometimes leaving is just listening to what your heart has already tried. I walked away without closing doors, and that was harder than it seems. Not broken, not dramatic, just tired of holding unspoken dreams. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no blame to rearrange. I walked away without closing doors and learned not all exits need to feel like change. I still remember how you breathe, the quiet before you sleep. I didn't leave because I stopped loving. I left because love started costing more than I could keep. I stayed gentle in my leaving, didn't take the photos down. I wanted us to stay human, not turn into something we drown. I confused hope with holding on, patience with staying still. But love shouldn't feel like standing in a door afraid to feel. I walked away without closing doors, felt it tight in my chest in the way my honesty pours. Unsure if leaving softly was best. You asked if this was permanent. I said I don't know yet. Don't know yet. I walked away without closing doors and chose myself without burning what we had in regret. Maybe I left space on purpose in case growth came back around. But love shouldn't ask you to disappear just to keep possibility sound. I didn't need certainty or closure or reasons carved in stone. I just needed to stop waiting in a place that never felt like home. And I understand gentle endings, how kindness can still mean enough. I trust the strength it takes to leave without turning love into something rough. I want a love that meets me fully, that doesn't live half open, unsure. I don't wanna stand in doorways anymore, waiting for something that never arrives for sure. I walked away without closing doors, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the loss, but because I remembered the good. I'll carry us without resentment, without rewriting what we were. I walked away without closing doors, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel clear and alive, not something you hover inside, not something you keep waiting on while your heart stands quietly outside. Some departures don't need final words, they need honesty. And if you walked away without closing doors, you weren't indecisive, you were leaving with care, with respect, with the hope that love, whether it returns or not, doesn't have to be destroyed to be released. I'm learning how to stay soft after everything went hard. After loving with my whole chest and leaving careful scars. I used to brace for disappointment, kept my guard close to my skin. I thought softness was dangerous, like it meant letting everything in. I confused strength with armor, silence with being okay. But carrying all that weight was slowly pulling me away. I'm learning how to stay soft without giving too much away. Not naive, not unprotected, just open in a quieter way. I don't need walls that never bend, a numbness I can't defend. I'm learning how to stay soft and still feel safe in the end. I stopped apologizing for feeling, stopped shrinking when I care. I'm letting emotions arrive naturally instead of asking if they're fair. I don't harden at every distance, don't assume the worst right away. I'm learning not every silence means love is trying to walk away. I mistook gentleness for weakness, for something I had to outgrow. But staying soft takes more courage than becoming someone cold. I'm learning how to stay soft even when things feel unsure. Not closing myself completely, but choosing what I let endure. I don't chase what won't meet me, don't beg to be seen or known. I'm learning how to stay soft without leaving myself alone. Maybe staying soft is trusting that love doesn't need to hurt, that you can open your hands again without being the one who breaks first. I don't need promises forever or guarantees written in stone. I just need space to be human, to feel deeply without feeling wrong. Now I notice how my body responds to kindness without demand. I trust the love that moves slowly, that doesn't rush to take or command. I want connection that listens, that stays when things feel tender to touch. I don't wanna lose my softness again just to survive someone else's lack of love. Stay soft, and that doesn't mean I forget. It means I carry what matters without letting it harden my chest. I'll love again with intention, with boundaries gentle but clear. I'm learning how to stay soft, and that's how I know I'm healing here. Staying soft isn't weakness, it's recovery. And if you're learning how to stay soft after everything you survived, it means your heart didn't close, it learned how to protect itself without disappearing. That's not fragile, that's brave.